When the leaves start to change and football is on TV every day but Wednesday, you know that fall is in the air, and white-tailed deer are not the only creatures that are moving around this time of year. Largemouth, smallmouth, and spotted bass all become incredibly active during this time of the year, feeding up to prepare for the wintertime. But where should you fish for them in your ponds and lakes, and what lures should you throw? My name's Tyler, and let's talk about it.
Another giant. Look at that, y'all.
I can't believe what I just caught.
Yes!
This video is brought to you by Bass Forecast. More on them and what they do to come in the video. In this video, I'm gonna cover my top 3 reaction style lures for the fall time that I believe, if fished properly and in the correct areas, will lead you to catch more bass no matter where you fish. But first, I feel like it's only proper to kind of give an overview of what fall weather and fall as a season actually means for bass fishing. As cold fronts begin to sweep through your area, they bring with them cold weather, of course, and winds, which can stir up the water, make it more dirty in your bodies of water, and of course drop the water temperature. And this kind of weather triggers the bass and basically every game fish to feed up to prepare for winter coming. But not every region of the country actually has a similar fall bite. Matter of fact, northern versus southern is totally polar opposite. If you live in states like Minnesota, Michigan, New York, Pennsylvania, you guys actually have ice on your lakes in the winter, and so the bass, usually northern strain bass, know that, and so your fall bite can be fantastic because the bass have to feed up to prepare for being under the ice for many months. But if you live down south like I do in Texas, Oklahoma, Mississippi, Alabama, especially Florida, we don't have any ice on our lakes. Matter of fact, our lakes hardly ever get water temperatures below like 45 degrees. And so because of that, we really don't have a good fall bite. There may be days when the fish exhibit the kind of behaviors, the fall moving, feeding behaviors I'm gonna talk about here in a second. But for the most part, our fall bite is pretty dang tough. But wherever you live, I am a firm believer that by moving fast-moving lures, moving yourself down the bank fast, in the boat or the kayak fast, is going to result in the vast majority of lakes and ponds in catching more fall-time bass. So now it's finally time to talk about the lures I recommend for this time of the year. I have made this list before, and the same 3 are on this list, but the order has shifted because of the introduction of a new shallow diving lure that rhymes with Librid Punter. My number 3 favorite lure on my list is going to be a spinnerbait. The spinnerbait has so many fantastic qualities that make it a great fall lure. Number 1 being, I think this is the best lure besides an Alabama rig that in the water to a bass could best represent a school of bait fish, because you have the blades, you have the skirt, you have the wire. That's a whole lot of flash, a whole lot of stuff moving around, and especially bass that are moving around feeding on bait fish, a spinnerbait is a great imitator for that. It's the most weedless of any reaction bait because the hook is facing up, and when you're retrieving it and you bump any sticks or grass or underwater cover and structure, it usually bumps over like this and either rolls over on its side or just kind of comes over the top. And I mentioned the flash part of this lure, and that works really great in windy, sunny conditions, even cloudy as well, because it really gets a fish's attention, especially in more clear water. It can also work in dirty water, maybe mix in an Indiana or a Colorado blade, but for the most part, I've got 2 willow leaf blades. I am casting at pieces of structure. I am casting over big flats and humps, hoping to get a fish's attention and of course make him react as the spinnerbait does so well. Now moving on to lure number 2, my second favorite for the fall time, and that is the vibrating jig. The vibrating jig, also known as the Kleenex name, the chatterbait, is a fantastic lure to catch bass, like I said, in the moving baits category. It is great in both ponds and lakes and catches bass all around the country, but the number 1 thing that I love about this lure is that as compared to the spinnerbait, it's a little bit easier to fish in any water column. So because the size, as long as you don't have a huge bulky trailer, is kind of more compact, it's a jig of sorts, and this is much larger, it sinks faster and is easier to keep it down in the water column. So if you're not sure where the bass are in your pond or lake, if they're in 10 feet of water or 4 feet or 2 feet of water, the vibrating jig, very similar to the lipless crankbait, is a multi-variable depth lure, and so you can cast it anywhere, let it sink to the bottom, or count it down in the water column a certain feet and then retrieve it back to you. And you can do the same thing with the spinnerbait. I've just found the spinnerbait has a tendency to rise in the water column, and the vibrating jig is a little easier to keep near the bottom. And one other characteristic this actually lacks that the spinnerbait has is the flash. Now, you know, there are vibrating jigs like this one here that have either a white painted blade or just a chrome blade, and that has flash. But even then, I would say the vibrating jig, it has sound, it pushes some vibration, motion, but it's just a little bit more finessey than the spinnerbait is, and especially in calmer water. I've caught way more fish in the fall on, really all year round, on a vibrating jig than I have a spinnerbait. And the last thing that's a comparison between these two is that I think a better bluegill imitation is the vibrating jig. Not a whole lot of spinnerbaits even come in like green pumpkin colors. Now, maybe that's just because, again, similar to like right-hand versus left-handed reels, people mostly throw right-hand reels and people mostly throw green pumpkin chatterbaits and shad-colored spinnerbaits. So could you catch bluegill imitation fish on a spinnerbait? You could, but I think for the most part, this imitates a bluegill a little better. Now, before we get to lure number 3 for fall reaction bait fishing, I gotta tell you guys about an awesome app that I have helped create that will help you catch more bass this fall, and that is Bass Forecast. Bass Forecast is an awesome mobile app that helps you understand your bodies of water better, and it uses both past, present, and future weather trends to give you a better understanding of what's going on your body of water. That way you can select the right lures, the right locations, and the right times to go fishing. As the seasons change, and especially fall being extra volatile and cold fronts blowing through, that can wreck your fishing days. But Bass Forecast and their buddy alerts let you know up to 10 days in advance if a day is worthy of going fishing. Inside Bass Forecast, you are just a few clicks away from finding all the information you need to become efficient out on the water, and there are instructional videos to teach you how to fish every single lure category out there, and they're good videos. I would know because I made them. So stop being unprepared for fall bass fishing. Bass Forecast can help. I will leave the app linked below in the video description. Now, let's talk about lure number 3 for fall reaction baits, which is the shallow diving crankbait. And this crankbait is none other than my personal favorite for both the fall and the pre-spawn and springtime, and that is the Strike King Hybrid Hunter. This stair-step shaped bill on the crankbait does some wild things in the water. It truly hunts left to right as you retrieve it, as the name would suggest, and it catches some dang bass. I don't know how many more times I have to say it until you guys all believe me, but I believe there's only 70% of y'all who truly understand how good this crankbait is. It catches fish. If you're fishing it around a rock, it'll catch fish. If you're fishing it around grass, it'll catch fish. And that's really where this thing was designed for and where it shines, because it will rip out, believe it or not, better than a lipless crankbait, better than a vibrating jig. It'll rip out of good, healthy grass, but it will snag a little bit on the dead grass. And in the fall, you want to find the best, healthiest grass possible. And so if you're fishing a point or a flat or a hump, or just your whole pond has tons of grass, and you want to find the best underwater locations the fish are going to be, they're going to be around the most healthy living grass that is still in your body of water. And the Hybrid Hunter is a great way to quickly find where the best grass is, because then you can make repeated casts at that area with a shallow diving crankbait. You can then go with a vibrating jig or a spinnerbait, and once your bite slows down, you can throw a drop shot or a shaky head or a Texas rig in those same areas, and you can only really quickly find them with a treble hooked lure that actually snags the grass. And the last reason why I love this crankbait is because even though it's small in size, it has a big presence and a loud sound in the water. The lip has that thing going side to side, it's hunting left and right, and has a big, or maybe a few big one-knocker beads inside. And so especially as fall weather begins to dirty up the water in your bodies of water, both the wind and sometimes lakes can have a turnover where the oxygen will flip, and that will make your bodies of water dirty. I want the loudest, most obtrusive lure in there, and the Hybrid Hunter fits the bill perfectly. And lastly, let's cover some quick locations the bass may be in your bodies of water this fall. And the number one key, I'm gonna say, is to keep moving and hit high percentage targets. And those can include the biggest clump of grass in your area, a point where some rocks and cattails kind of stick out beyond the rest. Really any points in general. A creek channel that swings up against a steep bluff wall that has a flat next to it. Really the most high percentage things you want to hit all throughout the day, and you're going to see me do that in practice. Either I just put the video out or I'm about to on a recent uncut video where I go 100% for catching bass on every high percentage piece of underwater structure. Fishing all the same honey holes that you did throughout the spring and the summer may lend you some success because the bass are going to use those same areas throughout the fall. But I have hardly ever found fish to sit in one place for multiple days. And so those same honey holes might be quasi honey holes, but they're not going to be all the time in the fall. I was recently fishing on a lake here in Minnesota a few days ago, and the first day that I fished it, I caught some fish out on the edge in about 12 to 14 feet of water on a crankbait, on a drop shot, and then 2 2 days later, after just the minuscule list, if that's a word, of cold fronts, the water dropped maybe 4 to 5 degrees, the fish were no longer there, and I wondered where'd they go. I went up to the docks that I did not catch them on 2 days previously, and some of the biggest fish that I had caught that week were on the docks that day. And so the bass in the fall are on the move. Just trust me when I say that I've seen it all across the country. Now, of course, there will be plenty of times on your bodies of water this fall where you can catch them on finesse tactics, on the drop shot, on the swim bait, on the suspending jerk bait, and of course, on the caffeine shad. I love that thing. But I believe that if you're struggling to catch fish and you throw these 3 lures, eventually you're gonna find some fall bass fishing success. Now, as we get into the full-blown fall, the Alabama rig, the old chandelier, can be hard to beat, and if you've never thrown it and you're in a big body of water, tons of bait fish, it is definitely a lure, a technique to try to learn how to fish well, and I will leave my masterclass on the Alabama rig up here in the corner. Make sure to click that video if you want to check it out. As always, my merch and my Tackle Warehouse affiliate links are linked down in the video description. If y'all could shop using those links, that would help out the channel continue to grow. My name's Tyler. As always, it's a pleasure, and we'll see you guys next time right here on TRF. Live Punter.